and welcome to The Long Game, a podcast by Macau Group where we sit down and have raw conversations with talented specialists and people who are passionate about what they do in the built environment. My name is Kelvin and I lead the team here at Macau. You can check us out at macau.com.au to learn more. That's makao.com.au. This is Volume 1 where we focus on the ins and outs of energy efficiency in buildings. Today's guest is James Matejko from Oknalux. Oknalux is an Adelaide-based company that specializes in distributing high-performance windows throughout the Australian market. Leave the door to your mind open and enjoy the conversation. Thanks for joining us today, James. Really looking forward to the conversation ahead. I know we've been talking offline and having a few chats here and there. I'm really excited for this one, despite all that's currently going on with the lockdowns and restrictions and all that. But it does also, there's a positive streak to it, given that now you're in Adelaide and we're here, we can still have this communication.
Technology is a wonderful thing when it's utilized, I think.
Yeah, true. For the listeners, James, I think it would be best to maybe just kickstart the conversation by just giving us a little bit of an overview of maybe who you are and just your professional background, really, in terms of where you got to where you are. And then maybe as a follow-up to that, just shedding a little bit of light on Oknalux.
Sure. Love the opportunity. Love any opportunity to be able to have a chat about energy efficiency around what's happening around the world, and construction, realistically. So a little bit of myself. My name's James. I'm born and bred here in Adelaide. I spent a little bit of time living over in Newcastle, so a lot of love to New South Wales, and a lot of my friends are in lockdown at the moment. I have been involved in, high performance windows, because that's really where sort of my focus is, around high performance windows, for probably the last 7 years or so. Mm-hmm. People ask, how did you get into that? Because I actually come from a finance background. So even, right now, I'm a fully qualified mortgage broker, but that's where I started my career.
It's a very interesting transition.
So people are like, how did you get into, construction and into windows coming from finance? And, those that know me obviously before, they're like, what just happened here? And look, realistically, the way that it played out is doing some research, right? Doing some traveling, right? And realizing that here in Australia, we don't have what the rest of the world has, right? Especially when it comes to building, and especially when it comes to, stuff that's in our houses, right? Technology that's literally been in Europe for the last, 30 odd years is only just starting to enter our country now. And so it's nothing new. The way that I got involved was realistically seeing a need, seeing an opportunity, and jumping on board with that. And I feel like what we can do sometimes is jump into something and just be like an expert in so many different facets, right? Whereas I feel like the industry that we need to be in now, when you really considered a specialist, is to really focus on one thing. And then when you're a professional and a specialist on one thing, then you can choose to diversify and be a professional on multiple things, right? So that's sort of how I got involved in that. At that time as well, went and did some specific training over in Europe around some of the products that we have. And, here we are, 7 odd years later, being involved in a company that, I've been able to fortunately be involved in fairly much from the beginning, help sort of pave the way for the industry, and, coming out with, I'm super proud of the fact that we've been able to come out with literally the top 3 rated, window suppliers in Adelaide, 6 years in a row. And I just take a lot of pride in that, because to me, it just comes down to having a good product, and on top of that, actually caring about people and offering them solutions to their problems.
Yeah.
And, those problems revolve around a couple of different facets, whether they come from, temperature control, heating, cooling in their houses, or it could be noise control in their houses, reducing noise, or it could be literally from a security point of view, where people just want to feel that little bit safer at home. And so I get just super excited, super passionate, not about Windows specifically.
Yeah.
Right. That's not where I get excited, but I get excited by the end result, like what Windows allow us to have. And that is, a more comfortable environment. And I'm really fortunate that, Oknalux, who I've, been partnered with since that time and helped to develop, really shares the same ethos. Like the company itself, I believe, is its own organization, right? It's its own living, breathing thing. And I'm fortunate to be aligned with that, where, as an organization and personally, we're able to add value to people and ultimately change people's lives by making them more comfortable. And I think that's just been even more prevalent, right, in the last probably 18 months. With the pandemic that's played out. Like, we should just be more comfortable at home.
Yeah, especially as we spend more and more time at home, well, in Victoria indoors as well. I'm curious to hear, because there are certain transferable skill sets from one domain to another. And I'm just curious as to what skills did you have, or do you still have in the finance space that translate well into what you're currently doing?
Yeah, see, interesting. So it seems to have very much come full circle. So obviously it started out in finance, mortgage broking, then jumping on board, with, a construction company and selling a product.
Yeah.
It then sort of comes very much full circle, because then it's just now value add that we can add to our customers. Right? Customers doing renovations, or, they're building a house, whatever else, that comes back with finance. But I've always just been like a numbers guy. I love numbers, because to me, numbers are just a universal language. It doesn't matter what language you speak, everyone understands numbers, right? I remember being in Thailand and I'm trying to communicate with someone, right, trying to buy some T-shirts and get a bargain on some T-shirts, right? And they're telling me something, I'm talking back. We don't understand each other because we don't speak the same language. So the lady literally just whips out her calculator, punches in some numbers, shows me, and I say, no. I change the numbers and I show her. And she's like, oh, no. And then she changes it back, right? But just by numbers, we're able to understand and communicate, right? And I love that, because it's a universal language, right? Yeah. And there's no fudging the numbers. So I've always just been a huge fan of it. Not that I've actually been great at math at school. And so to me, when it comes to Windows, when it comes to performance, right? And when it comes to obviously the money aspect, right? And the finance side, is being able to tie those things together, right? Tie them in together, because at the end of the day, everything has a monetary value, right? Everything has a monetary value. Even intrinsic value can be monetized if you put some money toward. Like if you then visualize, and there's still some value that you can put through that. So, a lot of the things that we sort of focus on, a lot of the webinars that I run as well, I like to actually take people through like some examples and some potential case studies or averages, or, of what it might be in relation to, how much money they could save on their heating, cooling, having some high performance windows. And then obviously the monetary value that would come in how much they save versus how much they actually have to, potentially borrow. And a lot of situations, having better performing windows in your house can literally put more money into your pocket compared to the amount of extra money that you have to spend in your mortgage. Right. And obviously that's going to vary depending on how big the house is, how you use your energy. There's so many factors involved in that. But, I've just looked at some sort of averages. To me, it seems like a really clear-cut decision. If you're building a house, you have to buy windows anyway. You have to buy them anyway. Like, this is what I don't get. Yeah. Right. So why would you choose to put bad ones in the house? That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
Right. I have conversations all the time with people specifically around building. They're like, oh, look, I don't know if I can afford that much extra, on the quote that I was just, that I was given. I was like, but hang on. Okay, yeah, let's just use an example. That's a $30,000 quote that you got from us, right? Mm-hmm. But you already have the price of windows in your project anyway. It's not an extra $30,000. It's the difference between the $30,000 minus the allowance that you've already got, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, oh yeah, that's actually true, right? And I find this really interesting. It's like, no, you're not adding windows, or you're not putting extra windows in, right? You've already got windows associated in that price. You just have to substitute them, right? And so sometimes, it might come out and it's like, well, actually, it's only like an extra $5,000 or it's only an extra $10,000 on top of the allowance that you already have in your windows. And then it's like, oh, actually, that is actually really affordable. There's a huge misconception when it comes to, specifically, people use the term double glazing, that it's obviously going to be double the price. And don't even speak to me about triple glazing because I don't even want to know, right? Right?
That'll be triple, quadruple the price.
Exactly. That's what people think. But that's not the case at all, right? I can literally say that there's been times where I've supplied a quote for high performance like windows that have double glazed glass inside of it that have come out cheaper than single glazed aluminium windows. Literally cheaper than it. And they're substantially better performing. So it's like, let's actually weigh up the value here.
Yeah.
Right? I use the term, high performance windows more so than double glazing. Double glazing is obviously the industry standard. That's what people call it. But I can say that there's so much variation between a double glazed window and a double glazed window, right? They're two very different things.
Yeah.
Right. And so I want to get past the stigma of just focusing on the glass and really start focusing on the entire window itself. That's really where I like to change my conversation. Because if someone is speaking to you, right, about glass, right? Oh, just get this glass or get that glass, because that's going to solve your issues. That's going to solve your noise issues, or that's going to solve, your heating, cooling issues. Understand that panel of glass has to go inside of a window. And 90%, if not, close to 95% of the windows on the market do not seal properly. So you're literally putting in a glass panel that's supposed to solve your issues, but then putting it into a leaky window system. So it's like, who cares what type of glass you've got, right? And so the conversation when you talk about windows has to be about the window, not about the glass, right? But most window companies, most glass companies, whatever you want to, sort of call them, they just talk about the glass because the glass is the easiest thing for them to control, right? It's the easiest thing to upgrade. I can upgrade you on that, right? I can't upgrade you on the frame because I don't have any good frames to upgrade you to. Right? And so whenever anyone's speaking, it's like, if we're having conversation around windows, the first thing we need to do is talk about the window frame. Speak about the window frame. Once we've got a good window frame, then we can start talking about the glass, because we can put any type of glass into any type of window, right? But we can't just put, we could put great performing glass into a crappy window. What's the point of that? And so I very much use the term like high performance windows so that people understand that there is a clear distinction between double glazing and then, good windows, right? Or great windows, we like to say. Because at the end of the day, a Holden or a Commodore and a Rolls Royce will still get you to the same place. One will just get you to there in a lot more comfort than the other one, right? And that's where this whole situation comes down to. It's all at that level of comfort. And that's ultimately why I do what I do. Like I said, I don't care about windows. I don't get excited about windows. What I get excited about is what those windows can do for us.
Yeah, I like that. And you've touched on a few of the not in detail, but a few of the technical elements, like distinguishing between the glass and the frame and how the frame really impacts the performance. And there are a lot of misconceptions around how the Windows Assistant performs. But before we dive in to hear more on an idea you've just raised in not indirectly, and Roberto, feel free to pitch in with any questions as well. I like the perspective that you have. First of all, channeling the conversation towards high performance Windows. Then it becomes a question of what are high performance Windows, because you're right, there are double glazed units out there that perform very, very poorly. But even before we get into that, just to put things into context, which is what you said, you're not. It's not like you have a passion for Windows. It's more about the outcome. And Windows are essentially the means to an end. And just keen to hear more about your perspective of what those outcomes are, and if you can just break them down into I think from the previous conversation we've had, there were three broad categories that you kind of put the outcomes in. So maybe just share a little bit more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, right, the reason that we have Windows is so that we can live in a space. There's literally a legal requirement. Every single building, right? We can't live in a building unless it's got windows in it, right? The whole idea of Windows, right, is allow us to obviously, shut off the outside, right? It allows us to be able to view what's happening outside, right? But also give us a little bit of protection as well. Lots of people seem to think that, especially double glazed windows, are really just around energy efficiency. And that's a very small aspect of what they can do, just as you mentioned. From my point of view, I think there's literally three broad reasons why people buy high performance windows. Mm-hmm. But coming back even before that, right? Mm-hmm. Why do we live in houses? Right? And that's what I want to ask the question. Why do we choose to live in a house? Right? And what does that house do for us? Right? To me, right, a house for me is the place that I can be myself. Right? It's the one space in the world, right, that I can be my total self. Right? It's the place that I escape whatever is going on in my life, right, externally. Unfortunately, there are some people that can't, they have more stuff going on at home than elsewhere, right, which I think is just really unfortunate, but it then really paves the conversation even more so around saying how important it is for us to be safe and comfortable in our own homes. Every single one of us deserves to be safe. Every single one of us deserves to be comfortable somewhere, right? And ultimately, to me, that place that it should be is in our own homes, safe from whatever is going on outside, right? So to me, that's my happy space at home. And even more so, as I mentioned, with the pandemic that's played out, we have been spending more time at home than we have ever spent, right? Either because, we have to, or because we don't feel as comfortable outside, or for whatever 100 reasons, we're spending more time at home. Whereas before, we'd wake up, we would, go to the gym, or we'd go to work. How much time did we actually spend at home? We didn't spend that much time at home, I don't think, right? We sort of would just have maybe dinner there, right? And we would sleep there, and maybe on the weekends we might spend, have some friends over or whatever else, right? But we would spend more time, at work, or, outside, or with friends, or, going to the movies, going to restaurants, just spending time away from our houses. And here with this pandemic, it's really played out when people were locked in their houses, having to work from home, having to go to school from home, right? Having to, do literally most things from home, starting to realize I actually don't like it at home very much, right? And that could be from, the kids. It could be from the noise. It could be, right, from lots of different facets, or it could be from the fact that it's actually cold in my house, or it actually gets really hot in the house. And so to me, it comes down to that level of comfort again, right? Where I'm supposed to feel safe because there's all this pandemic, all this stuff that's going on outside, right? And I'm just tuning into the news to figure out what's going on outside of my little bubble around inside the house, right? But then it's like, but it's actually cold here or it's hot here. And so now I have to run the heater or run the air conditioner. And then I'm like concerned because the cost of electricity is actually expensive. And I don't know if I've got a job tomorrow, right? How do I afford that? And so here we are with this high level of anxiety inside of our own homes, right? Which is the exact opposite of what our homes are supposed to be for us, right?
Yeah.
Our homes are supposed to be the one place where that anxiety falls away. If it is 40 degrees outside and I want to walk around with a jumper on, I should be able to, right? If, my neighbors are making a whole lot of noise outside and I want to sleep, I should be able to, right? In my house, I should be able to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, right? That's the one space that I should just be me. And I don't understand why I need external forces to govern what is happening inside of my house. Like, it's my house. It's my decision, right?
To reduce the level of anxiety or stress, in the sense of you're sort of trapped inside the house, it's very important to have that connection to the outside to reduce the claustrophobic feel. So that's when the windows play such an important role. And the high performance windows goes hand in hand. Thermal comfort, reduce the energy or increase the energy efficiency, and have that connection to the exterior, especially when you spend like 8-10 hours a day working from home now.
100%. I mean, we're working from home. We're doing more hours at home than we're actually doing in the office. Let's be honest, right? Right? We're actually working more now than we've ever worked, I think. And even with technology now, let's just meet on Zoom, or let's meet on virtually, so I don't have to drive out to see you and then drive back. Right? So we're actually fitting more inside of our day than we've ever fit now. Stuck at home, blowing the heater on my feet just to try and stay warm while we're having a conversation. And so, that sort of is just setting the tone, right, of what I feel about our houses and the spaces that we're in. Like, we deserve to be comfortable, right? But to me, that level of comfort comes from, as you mentioned before, like 3 different facets. And one of those facets is, energy efficiency or, temperature control, which I think is, a great part. We've mentioned it already around, the cost of electricity. Here in SA, we actually had the highest rates of electricity in the world, something we can be really proud of. Thank you. In the world. At one stage, we had the highest rates of electricity in the world, right? So something that's our claim to fame. We also had a one-way highway, also another claim to fame, right? I had friends coming over from New South Wales that we need to see this highway that only goes one way, right? I was like, no problem, let's go on it. With having high performance windows, in some situations, we can help to reduce, heating and cooling costs up to 80%. Now, keep in mind, I didn't say electricity costs, right? I said heating and cooling costs. And we can delve into that, and we can jump into some numbers further on, right?
Yeah.
But, temperature control, I should be able to be comfortable, right? If I want to walk around with an hoodie, because for whatever reason, they seem to be the big thing at the moment, right? And it's hot outside, I should be able to, right? Why shouldn't I be comfortable, right? Or if it's snowing outside, I should be able to walk around in my underwear because I have the right to do that in my own home and not have to run the heater in order to, to be comfortable. One of the other aspects is obviously noise control.
Yeah.
Or noise reduction. We literally, from our councils, right, from a legislation point of view, we can't have specific noise levels at specific times, right? There's legal requirements around it, right? We can't start using power tools in the middle of the night, right? We can't just use a jackhammer in the middle of the night, right? Because that's when most people sleep. But what about those people that are shift workers? What about those people that are our paramedics, our frontline workers, right? That at the moment are our heroes, right? Who are doing the work in the middle of the night, coming home to rest in the day, and it's perfectly acceptable as me as their neighbor to use my jackhammer next door. How is it okay for me in the middle of the night to have a good night's sleep because of noise control, but not okay for the, the doctor or the paramedic who did a night shift to have a comfortable and quiet sleep during the day? Why do we not deserve to be, to have our homes quiet? And there is huge medical research just to, say how much sound impacts our health.
Yeah.
We're talking about high blood pressure. We're talking about lack of sleep. And as a result of lack of sleep, lack of concentration. How are you supposed to perform at work and do your job if you didn't sleep the night before? Because your neighbor has to run his heater or air conditioner all night, and that compressor is literally right outside your window. We have customers that come to us literally because their neighbor runs an air conditioner. You know what? We can get you great windows and get your neighbor great windows so he doesn't have to run it as much. But if he does run it, you can be quiet in your home too, right? It's all complementary. Yeah. And then the third facet that we really focus on is around security. Again, feeling safe in our own homes, right? It's so interesting how often, like when there's a break-in into people's homes, the anxiety that comes from people, like, and I speak to people, right, around, stuff that happens or whatever, it's because people come to us for security issues. Someone breaks into their house and people just don't feel safe in that space anymore. Someone has been in my space without my knowledge. That's not okay. Right?
It's a huge intrusion, yeah.
Huge intrusion. And then you have to figure out, like, what's been taken, what have they touched, what have they done, right?
They come back again.
Like, are they going to come back? Exactly. Are they going to come back again? Lucky I didn't get hurt this time, but we're like, and so here we are, just like this scope and this, everything just manifests and, grows into something huge for us to not feel safe and comfortable in our homes again. I think about a customer of ours over in WA who has a child who is autistic, right? And there was one day he just wasn't feeling himself. He was feeling, anxious and whatever else. And, his mum came and spoke to him. She's giving us feedback on this, or on the experience that she had. And she's trying to figure out, like, what's going on, speaking to him. And he expressed to her that he didn't feel safe, right? He didn't feel secure. And she's like, oh, look, you don't have to feel like that you're not safe. Like, we're behind double glazed windows. We're behind some really safe windows. You don't have to feel scared. And literally just saying that to her son was enough for him to have that sense of relief and for him to actually take that and actually feel comfortable and actually start feeling safe inside of his space, right? Because I feel like, especially, people with higher sensory needs, they generally need it firstly to be quieter, right? They just feel stuff more, right? And that is, they're attuned to sound more, that it impacts them more. So of course they need to be quieter. I think about this one job that we were quoting for, doing a job for a special needs childcare center. Right. And I remember doing quote around it, and it's surprising that the prices and the quotes that came out for this project were literally on par with each other. So there was obviously, single glazed aluminium windows that were quoted from one supplier. There was our windows, high performance, completely sealed, draft proof, high performance windows. And the price was pretty much the same, like small variation, right? And that's that's the whole job, like supplied and installed, right? And so I'm like, here we are building a project for some children with high sensory needs, with a space that they can have that's quieter, that's more energy efficient, and another one that's not so much for exactly the same price. And it's interesting that we did not get the job. So
you
to
get
me,
the reason behind it?
Well, see, like I don't know the exact reason behind it, but to me, from that point of view, how is it an economic decision to make? Because the price was comparable. There was literally a very minute difference between the two. So if we have two quotes here for literally the same price, but one that gives you a whole lot of extra value than the other one, how is the decision not to go with what you get more value from? Right? Because, most people just look at, just the clear-cut numbers. And that's why I think there's so much conversation around just energy efficiency, saving money on electricity, right? As we've just mentioned, we have customers that talk to us around sound issues and around, security issues. How then do you quantify the value from those things? Right? Yeah. How do you quantify and monetize a good night's sleep? How do you put a price on that? Because it's easy to say, if I spend X amount of dollars, I can save X amount of dollars on my heating and cooling costs. That's really easy, clear-cut numbers, right? And you can work out the economic decision where it's beneficial or not, right? But how then do you put a monetary value on intrinsic value? Just like some of the things that we've discussed, right? On being able to walk around in my underwear when it's snowing outside, right? Yeah. On feeling safe inside of my house, right? On
being able to sleep at any time because you don't have a lot of noise coming in,
Or do we have to start actually calculating the cost of going to the doctor for them to write out all these pills because I've got a high blood pressure because I'm not getting enough sleep and that's impacting my health, right? Do we need to start quantifying it that way, right? And I can say, well, look, this is the average of what it costs people to go to the doctor and get themselves fixed when there's a problem, right? Because we don't think like that.
It's a very interesting take. Either confusing or not understanding the difference between price, cost, and value.
Yes.
And we tend to get fixated on price, which is it higher or is it lower? Whereas with cost, it has a time element to it. So you might not see it immediately, but over time, you pay through other ways, whether that's in terms of medical expenses, whether it's in terms of energy bills to some extent in the longer term, and other ways. And then you have the value perspective, which is the intrinsic stuff, which is really hard to not even to put a price on it, just even the quantifying it as well, because a lot of it tends to be very subjective. So a comfortable temperature for me might be very different to what's comfortable to someone else. So it has a subjective kind of element to itself, and I think we tend to shy away from that because there's no clear-cut or objective way to say these are the actual figures in terms of the ROI or in terms of the implications from a numbers perspective. It's hard to have that dialogue, which is very interesting when you talk about windows and a lot of the building fabric elements or envelope elements. The conversation really goes into that price domain. Occasionally, it seeps into the costs perspective as well. But when it gets into the value, we rarely ever talk about that value aspect, unfortunately. So it's very refreshing to hear it from your vantage point. And I like how you started actually talking about why do you want to live in a house, or what does it mean to have a home, and that using that as a starting point, because that's where the value starts from. And then from there, it kind of moves into the other domains. It's very, very, very interesting. It's a very refreshing take, I think.
I was going to suggest something that could be helpful for Windows manufacturer like Oknalux. Perhaps have like a showroom. I think the potential residential buyer needs to, or even commercial needs to experience the thermal comfort, the acoustic comfort. So I think to being inside, like even a prototype or a showroom, to understand how it feels to be inside and feel thermal comfort. When you go to a shop and you want to buy a new pair of runners, You try them on. I didn't like this one, I'll try the other one. So just to talk about thermocouple, it's very hard to understand, to feel it. Yeah, I think to have I remember when I did my passive house certification course, all the students went to this place called Carmelite, and they had a little prototype house, thick insulation, triple glaze, high performance windows. You go inside this little house and you go, wow, it was really cold outside. Now I can wear my t-shirt, it feels comfortable. So I think to have that feel, to have that perception, yes, I tested the product, it's really good. Then I can invest the money now. Because otherwise it becomes, I think, very subjective for someone that doesn't have the technical knowledge.
Yeah, look, I 100% agree. I feel like, the stuff that we're sort of talking around is, again, that level of comfort. And it's hard to sell that to someone, right? Because it's hard for you to understand what I'm talking about. The best way for you to understand it is when you can experience it. And it's when you experience it that you start understanding the value that you have, right? And I hear it all the time. Like I speak to, lots of passive house designers and builders and, whatever else. And lots of even, customers that feel that space as well. You talk about this and whatever else, and, it just gives you a different feel. And people are like, why would a house feel different? But that is exactly what happens. When people walk into a house that is built to be, high performance, and with that obviously comes the element of windows and doors inside of that. It's a completely different feel. You literally walk into the space and it's just different, right? Yeah. It's more comfortable. And so, but in saying that, it's still a very new concept in Australia. I'm not going to say it's new technology, right? Because it's not new technology by any stance. It's just a new concept here in Australia. And this is what I find really interesting around Australia. And I would say one of my pet peeves is, even coming from a finance background, people are taking 30-year mortgages out on houses, and those houses do not have a 30-year lifespan. We look at what happens over in Europe and, and the rest of the world. We've got some people living in houses that are 200 years old, and they are still more energy efficient than what we have here in Australia. And so you look at this, incredible architecture, but on top of that, it's actually designed well to still be comfortable, right? And here we are building houses that sometimes after 20 years need to be knocked down because they're out of date, right? Because they're leaking, right? Or they've got mold issues, or, they're just super drafty, or for whatever of 100 different reasons as to why someone's not happy about their house anymore. And for whatever reason, there seems to be this huge push towards stay where you are, just knock the place down and put something better on it. But you've still got a mortgage on that house, and now you're knocking that whole house down to put another larger mortgage on it. You still haven't paid off the first house before you put the second house on it. Like, why can we not just be smarter about this, right? We seem to be living in this world that's all about the smart age, and it's like, I don't understand. I remember taking a trip to Dubai a couple of years ago. If you guys know too much about that, I went on a tour and they were obviously explaining about what happens. And Dubai's really only come onto the scene in really the last 10 years or so. Like that, it's literally exploded, right? And before that, what happened is, I think it's the princes, of those places. They went out and they said, look, it is better for us to develop what we have. Let's not learn it ourselves. Let's not go through 200 years of backbreaking, trial and error to figure out where we want to be for us to catch up to the rest of the world. This technology, the infrastructure, the information is already readily available. Let's just get access to it. So all they did is literally say, we want to invite all these professionals from overseas, bring them over to us, pay them sizable sums of money to get access to their information. And as a result of that, literally, it's a city that is now pretty much a country. They've literally exploded on the scene and now are a huge force for economic growth, right? For immigration, for so much, because they didn't choose to learn it themselves, but just get access to the information. And this is what we have here in Australia. The information is there. The technology is there. We just need to grab that and start using that here. The idea behind a passive house, the idea behind a high-performance window is like decades old, right? We're talking 30-odd years of this stuff being, access to. And here we are in Australia, we're like, oh, I don't know if that's going to be good for us. We'll just get a bigger air conditioner, no problem. Oh, no, you don't need good windows in your house. We'll just give you a bigger air conditioner. Oh, no, we'll just put solar on that to combat the air conditioner. And so all we're doing is like, oh, we'll fix it with something else, and then we'll fix that issue with something else, and we'll fix that issue with something else. It's like, why not just fix the issue rather than putting a Band-Aid on it?
Not addressing the core issue, the core problem.
Right? I feel like it's the same thing like with insurance companies. I was just speaking to someone about it, right? Literally last night. They're saying, oh, yeah, I had a water leak in the house. Insurance company came. They didn't fix the water leak, but they fixed the damage from the water leak. So it's like, so all we're doing is fixing the cause of the problem, but not fixing the problem to stop that happening again and again, right? And I can't understand the mentality.
There's definitely a disconnect somewhere, and just having those conversations can be a little bit challenging to some extent, because sometimes you look at the ESG or sustainability initiatives that are proposed, and sometimes you're left with question marks. So like in Victoria, we do have the better apartment design standards, which came in 2016. And before that, you had these apartments that had or relied on board lights, so the bedrooms didn't have windows and things like that, which was when you think about it, it sounds like very counterintuitive. Like it's not very livable space. I have a lot of friends who come from overseas, and they're looking for apartments, and that's the stock that's available for you to either buy or rent. It leaves you scratching your head a little bit, like how did this come into market in the first place? So yeah, there are a lot of things that are very hard to understand how they got there in the first place, why they persist in the second place. But yeah, before as it slowly wind down, I'd be interested in hearing. So you mentioned you have the thermal comfort in terms of the outcomes that we get from high performance windows. You have the thermal comfort aspect is the temperature control. And then you have the noise reduction and security, and a lot of the conversation tends to be around the temperature. Actually, the most of the conversation lean towards daylight, so just allowing daylight to come in. So it's only recently that I find that the topic of thermal comfort has come into, or in terms of how much heat loss or heat gain comes in through the windows. And even now, it's still a debate we have in some projects in terms of what windows to be installed and what specs to go for. The other two, so noise and security. Could you just expound a little bit on that for maybe some of the listeners that maybe haven't really made that connection before, especially so for example for the people who just think of windows as it's just a source of daylight during the day, but not necessarily as a means to control noise levels or security. And when we catch up in the future episode, we'll talk about more in detail about the thermal comfort. But if you could just touch on those two aspects.
Well, yeah, realistically, when it comes to security, we've talked about the aspect of obviously feeling more comfortable, right?
Yeah.
With that, generally, when you have a high performance window, there's things like multiple points of locking, right? So there's multiple locks. But on top of that, we've also got things like double the amount of glass. And so if someone was to come along and break a panel of glass, usually breaking a panel of glass makes a lot of noise. Right? So to me, when I think about, security and, locks and stuff, locks are really only there to keep out honest people. That's the way that I feel. They're only there to keep out honest people. If someone goes and sees, oh, that's locked, that's obviously not a space for me, right? Because I'm an honest person. Whereas people that want to get into something will probably get into something, right?
Yeah.
It's the dishonest people that will go past that. But in saying that, you also need to be a little bit smarter, I think. So I actually, to an extent, have a lot of respect for, criminals, because they have to actually think outside the box a little bit. But the way I see it is everything comes down to, just we mentioned, a value add, right? So if I'm a criminal, for example, and I'm going into a space, I'm going to find the windows that I know that are going to be the easiest for me to do my job. Trying to get into a space, I'm going to scope a place out before I actually try anything. We've had feedback from some of our customers that have said that people have tried to break into, their houses with some of our product, which I think is great, because obviously it means our product's out there. And but what I can say is that all the feedback that I've got is that no one has got in. They've damaged the frame enough for the frame to be replaced, or the window to be replaced, or whatever else, right? But they still have not got into the space. And that's what I love. That is what I get excited about, right? Because it's a completely different feeling being inside a house where someone has actually got in, as opposed to being inside a place that someone has tried to get in. Completely different feeling. And so we can never stop, right, people doing bad stuff to us. But what we can do is potentially put a barrier around us to reduce that from happening, or reduce the severity of that, right? Because I know how I would feel. I'll be fortunate that I haven't had anyone break into my house. I'm probably one of a very few people that actually haven't had, I've had cars broken into or whatever else, but never my actual house, or even attempted that I can, feel. But I can still feel like when I get into my car and I can see someone's got into this, right? It makes me feel uncomfortable. No one's there anymore, right? But it still makes me feel uncomfortable, as opposed to, right, where someone comes along and I hear feedback from some of my neighbors saying, hey, I just noticed someone coming and sort of trying to open up your door from your car. And I'm like, yeah, that's fun, right? Yeah. Someone's tried to open the door to the car and then kept walking because it was obviously too hard because the door was locked. Is a completely different feeling to someone got into my car and being inside of the car. Then obviously, then touching around noise that you've talked about. And most of the conversation that I've sort of talked about is really around obviously that external noise coming in, right?
Yeah.
But what about the other way around? What about wanting to keep noise in? Being in my own house, I should be allowed to play loud music and allowed to play the music that I want to play, because that's what I want. I should be allowed to do that. If I want to play the drums, I should be allowed to play the drums. And so, but obviously in the conventional houses that we have, no, we need to set up an agreement with my neighbor that says, between the hours of, 11 and 12, I'm allowed to play my drums, or I'm allowed to play music between these times, right? It's my house.
Yeah.
But in saying that, if I'm the neighbor, it's my house. Why should I have to listen to your stuff?
It's true.
I shouldn't have to. So it works both ways. And just as much as windows are going to help, high performance windows are going to help to reduce the noise, external noise coming in, it's going to help reduce the external noise coming out, which means if I like to play music, for example, if I have great performing windows, it's great. It's better for my neighbors.
Yes.
Or, the dog barking, or what, for whatever 100 reasons that we have issues with noise, right? The kids are playing outside. Don't let the kids play outside, right? I send my kids outside because I don't want them inside making all that noise. But then the neighbors across the, behind me or next to me should be allowed to be comfortable inside the house, because why should they have to listen to my kids? Right. So it's this whole level of comfort. Right. And as I mentioned, there's noise regulations between specific hours. Yeah. So we've identified the need and we've put some regulations in place. But why are we not actually fixing the problem? Let's just Band-Aid it up. Here, you've got a scratch over there. Let's put a Band-Aid over here. Let's just go to what the issue is. Let's fix the issue. And, it's not just the windows, right? It's not just the windows, but to me, they're usually the worst thing in our houses. We all understand the importance of putting insulation inside of it, right? Inside of our walls. We understand putting insulation inside of our ceilings and, wrapping the house so it's, not drafty. We get it. And yet we don't think that windows are in the wall. Oh, I've got, R5 wall, insulation inside of my walls, but I've got this giant window that takes up the entire wall, but I've still got great performing insulated walls. Yeah, but you've just substituted that whole wall, with a large window of 4 millimeter glass inside of a frame that's not sealed properly. Again, am I missing something?
There's a lack of understanding of how the different elements interplay or interact with each other, and how they affect the overall performance as well. So just because you've paid attention to one thing and you've completely ignored the other doesn't mean you're achieving good outcomes.
Absolutely. So, yeah, happy to keep chatting, getting into some more detail around the other stuff. But to me, what I really wanted to share today is how should you feel inside of your house realistically? Because just as you've mentioned as well, it's what my level of comfort is different to someone else's level of comfort. But I should be able to dictate what that level of comfort is, not external factors. And so to me, like I mentioned, I don't get excited by windows. What I get excited about is what those windows allow us to have. And usually the weakest performing portion of our houses is usually our windows, right? Some people say, oh, you should do this and you should do that and you should do that. It's like, that's fine. But you usually have insulation in your walls. You usually have, you've already generally got something, because we are building houses that have some of these things incorporated, right? It may not be the best, but we're still talking about the weakest point being the windows. So I'll be honest, the thing that gets me the most excited is existing houses, right? Where a customer comes to me and all they do is change one element of their space, right? They live in a space, let's say in their bedroom, right? And their issue is with heating and cooling, or it's with noise, or it's with security, or it's with all three of them. And all we do is take that window out and put a better window in. And it's like their life changes. Their life changes over one little simple thing. And I love the feeling that comes from that, because you experience the difference. And you never know where that value comes until you experience that value, right? Just as we mentioned, this huge disconnect between cost and value. That's where my passion is. My passion is on, allowing people to have more comfortable lives. That's what gets me excited. And the only way I think that that's going to happen is when we start having more conversations around it. So I obviously appreciate very much the opportunity for us to be able to have a chat today, or more so it feels like I've just been chatting the whole time.
Intent of the podcast is bringing people who are specialists in their own domain and share the knowledge and the insights, especially those hidden gems that are not necessarily obvious, because you do get to see things from a different vantage point. So whether it's misconceptions or priorities or whatever it is, even case studies like you've mentioned with the childcare facility and things like that, it's always good to hear that from a first person perspective. So thanks for again making time today. Thanks for sharing. I like how this particular episode was mostly to set the context of the future the future episode, which is when we'll be going into the details of, say, thermal comfort, the numbers, the figures, and all that. I really like the take, which is something that we are currently taking into or embedding into how we do things as well. So moving the conversation from a pure, say, environmental question to framing it from that element of quality of life as a whole. Because then when you start to have conversations around quality of life, it's very hard to find people who are against health, comfort, safety, well-being, and all those elements. So then once that becomes the premise, becomes, I find it's easier to then have the conversation of, okay, so how can we then integrate high performance windows, high performance fabric, and think about the long term as well, rather than just the price today.
Yeah, I love that. Quality of life, 100%.
So yeah, thanks again, James. And we'll be catching up very soon. Yeah, to deep dive into the thermal comfort side of things. And as you said, you're passionate about the numbers. So learn a thing or two about the numbers as well.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it, mate. Absolute pleasure to be with you. Looking forward to continuing our conversation, mate.
Yeah. Awesome. Maybe just before we go, is for people who want to learn more about whether it's yourself. I know there's a lot of content, a lot of good content you've put out on YouTube and on LinkedIn. You run a few webinars every now and then. So if people want to either learn more about whether it's yourself, the company, etc., where should they go? We'll provide the links in the show notes afterwards.
Absolutely. So very much. If you want to, I love having conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So more than happy to have a conversation with anyone that wants to have a conversation with me. If you are interested, obviously, in some better performing products for your next build or renovation, whatever it is, feel free to if you're in SA, visit our showroom. Alternatively, you can jump on our website. There's, we've got oodles of information on there. Our website is obviously www.oknalux.com.au. That's OKNALUX. Or, we have plenty of information as well, lots of videos as well on YouTube, just as we mentioned. If you were to type in Oknalux, again, OKNALUX, into YouTube, you'll probably see plenty of videos of myself speaking at a camera, as well as lots of other stuff. I love giving content. I love sharing, because like I mentioned before, like the only way we're going to help shape the industry that we have is by having more conversations. It's literally one conversation at a time that we start building, and growing this out. And it's when more people start talking about it that our governments actually start realizing, this is actually something we should probably start talking about because people care about it, right? And start implementing it. So I love us being able to shape the industry. As well, like I said, on LinkedIn, if you want to follow me or follow Oknalux, you can jump on there, search for me, James. And you can search for my surname, Matejko, Matejko. Feel free to connect with me. I'm fairly active on that platform. Just happy to give you as much information as possible. Reach out. Let's have a chat. More than happy to keep that conversation going.
All right. Thanks, James. Thanks, Roberto. And keep safe, and we'll catch up soon.
Speak soon.